All right, we've got breaking news, but not the news that you thought. Anyways, it's been a crazy day, as everybody knows. But we're going to do some quick introductions as we're in the green room. And in the green room, we're going to go reverse order in terms of people that are going to be speaking at the event. So let's start with my co-host on Twitter, Vala Afshar. What's going on?
Hi, everyone. Episode 208. Looking forward to our discussion this afternoon. Thanks.
Very cool. Our producer, Elle. She's hiding. Just esteemed producer. All right, cool. All right, let's go to Don.
Yeah, Don Tapscott. I'm executive chair of the Blockchain Research Institute, and my new book is about supply chains, and it talks about supply chains and pandemics, called The Supply Chain Revolution. Number 17 in terms of books.
Oh no, it's gonna. That's it. 17. No, we're getting more. We're going into the details, which is awesome.
Half of them my mother bought most of the copies.
Lenley?
The other half were big books.
I'm Lenley Hensarling. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer over at Aerospike. We're a database company powering companies like Trade Desk that are sort of purely digital, high-speed ad tech companies, as well as a lot of financial services companies. And doing international interbank payment systems as well with our strongly consistent NoSQL super fast database.
Very cool. Stéphane, Pascal.
Hi, I'm Stéphane. I'm one of the co-founders of Wonder, and we're building a virtual events platform that puts networking and spontaneous interactions at its core.
Hi, Pascal. I'm another co-founder of Wonder, one of three.
Very, very cool. Hey, we're glad to have both of you here. And you guys are calling in from Berlin, so thank you for coming in. So, all right, cool. Well, let's go do the show.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guest, your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV, and we'll do our best to answer them during the show. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business, regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, ZDNet. I see him on Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, Fox Business, almost on a daily basis. I consider him one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my ultimate co-host. If you think about it, the one and only Vala Afshar. If you want something inspirational on Twitter, if you want to think about great keynotes, talk to Vala. He's actually the top follow for CIOs, CEOs, and CMOs all over the world. And more importantly, a stand-up guy on TV, on keynotes, and everywhere around. But hey, it's not about us. It is really about our awesome guests. And who do we have to kick it off today?
Ray, it's an honor and a privilege. Our first guest is Don Tapscott, Executive Chairman of the Blockchain Research Institute, one of the world's leading authorities on the impact of technology on business and society. Don has authored, get ready for this, Ray, you and I have written one book. Don has authored 17 books, including Wikinomics, and a book that I think everyone should have on their business desktop. I surely do. One of the best books written about the importance of blockchain revolution with Don and Alex Tapscott. Don's most recent book was co-authored by Alex Tapscott, a globally recognized investor, advisor, speaker on blockchain technologies and crypto assets. Blockchain revolution, how the technology behind Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies changed the world. According to Harvard Business Review's late Clay Christensen, is the book that literally on how to survive and thrive in the next wave of technology-driven disruption. A must-read book. In 2017, Don and Alex co-founded Blockchain Research Institute, whose 100-plus projects are definitive investigation into blockchain strategies, use cases, implementation challenges, and organizational transformations. Don's member of the Order of Canada and is ranked the second most influential management thinker and the top digital thinker in the world by Thinkers 50. He's an amazing follow on Twitter. You can learn from him on Twitter on a frequent basis at DTAPSCOTT. Welcome, Don Tapscott, to DisrupTV.
Great to be here, as it were.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Don, we've had you as a keynote at our conference. You know, I've seen you around the world speaking. I think we've been on the stage sometimes together. You know, this is awesome. You actually you wrote a new book and it just came out. It's on the supply chain revolution, really building on some of the things that you learned about blockchain. And I think that's kind of interesting. And you also wrote this interesting article kind of related to this about the new social contract for a digital age. Let's start there, because you start in January 2030. You're looking back a decade. COVID-19 is, I don't know, somewhat over by then, we hope, and it took over a lot of folks. And what's going on? What's happening?
Well, thanks, Ray, and it's great to be on the show. Let me wind back a bit to sort of explain this. I wrote a couple of books in the 1980s that nobody read, and then
That's not true.
I read that. What do you mean? That is not true at all, dude. I mean, we all read this.
I started writing some bestsellers in the early 1990s. So 93 was Paradigm Shift, obviously a big book. And 94, The Digital Economy, which is, they say is the first bestseller about the web in business. And 20 years later, I had to reflect on what had occurred because I was asked to write the 20th anniversary edition. So I had to read the book again. It held up quite well. But a couple of things really struck me. One of them was the subtitle was Promise and Peril in the Age of Network Intelligence. The book was mainly about the promise. The internet, the web, they're going to be amazing and do all these wonderful things. I had a little section called The Dark Side. And I said some things could go wrong. There were 7 of them. I won't go through them all, but I said we could lose our privacy in an irrevocable way. Check. I said some big companies could capture our data, the new asset class of the digital age. We could see growing social inequality. We could see a bifurcation of wealth where the economy was growing, but the middle class is shrinking. Check. I said, I think technology is going to create jobs. It always does. Schumpeter created destruction. Ray, you've talked about this. I said, but yeah, the opposite could happen. We could have a new wave of technology come in so fast that it would create structural unemployment. And, get ready for the combination of blockchain and AI. In the United States, 48 out of 50 states, the number one job type for men is truck driver, and for women, it's cashier. Well, those are gone, not in a century from now, in a decade, and on and on. I said, I think the internet's going to bring us all together because we'll have access to the same information. I said, but the opposite could happen. I mean, we could have a fragmentation of public discourse where people follow their own little point of view. And as we all know today, we're in these self-reinforcing echo chambers where for a lot of people, the purpose of information is not to inform us, it's to give us comfort. So bring in the pandemic, and all of these problems have been supercharged so fast. We're seeing the systematic inequality. Well, poor people, and it turns out people of color and race, Black people, Indigenous people, homeless people are suffering disproportionately from the pandemic. We're seeing this thing is exposing with a searing clarity these really deep problems in society, like racial injustice. And, with the fragmentation of public discourse has enabled shucksters to challenge basic science and prevent an effective response to the pandemic. So, and the pandemic has also revealed all kinds of deep problems in our supply chains and our systems for medical data, which are a subset of our systems for our identity. So, this is really a turning point in history, and we're all starting to think, I hope, really big about what kinds of changes we need to make. And the conclusion, sort of is kind of a long answer, is that I think we're going to need a new social contract. The agreement between citizens, governments, other institutions, the private sector, civil society. And when you think about it, when we went from the agrarian age to the industrial age, we developed the social contract. We figured people needed to be literate, so we created the public education system, created a law. You have to go to school. It's against the law. We figured that you can't have one oil company owning all the oil, created anti-monopoly legislation. We figured out that the people who live in the city, we're going to need a social safety net and so on. I don't think that we've done any of that for the digital age. So I've created this modest little document. It's sort of a discussion point, and people can find it all online. It's a draft new social contract. I called it the Declaration of Interdependence. And if you Google that and my name, you have a look. It's almost a book-sized thing. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but maybe it'll be a tractor trailer roadshow or a TV series or a podcast. A book. I don't know. It could be who knows? But
it should be all of that.
Yeah, but not to joke around. This is very serious. And what I did in this article, it was for a CoinDesk, is I looked back from 2030 and I talked about how it was that we got there and what had to happen for a new contract to be forged.
It's you have a remarkable track record of accurately forecasting the future, and so I just the opening paragraph again for those of you that watching, this is a must read. January 2030, looking back a decade, the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 to 2022 did more than take 5 million lives and devastate the global economy. Just for record, last week I believe we crossed 1 million lives. So you're projecting in the next 2 years an additional 4+ million. It revealed with searing clarity weaknesses, not just in our political leaders, governments, and society, but in our system for everything from supply chains to data to public health. And you did list the 5 weaknesses which you talked about. You led with systematic inequality, racial injustice. We all know today it's health crisis, economic crisis, racial inequality, climate, misinformation. So there's just deficit of trust because of all these concurrent crises happening just since in the beginning of 2020. You also talked about, which you just mentioned, these 6 principles. You highlighted the countries around the world, New People's Congress assembled around to create these 6 principles in the next decade. Again, this is an article coming from 2030. And you listed inclusive models of global problem solving, rethinking democracy for citizen engagement, new commitment to justice, new models for work and education, new models of identity, a commitment to sustainability. And long before the pandemic, you had actually referenced sectors and industries that were going to be deeply impacted by something that perhaps is bigger than the internet itself, that being distributed ledgers and blockchain technology. Can you talk about any one of these 6 principles that you believe has the most likeliness to be adopted in the next decade?
Well, a big one on everybody's mind right now with the election coming up is, and I'm a Canadian, I don't vote, this is not a political statement, but is that we do have a crisis of legitimacy of our democratic institutions. Many countries, young people aren't voting. They like the bumper sticker, don't vote. It only encourages them. And, that's kind of funny, except it's not really, because what's the alternative to democracy? And the idea of legitimacy is that you may disagree with who's in power, but at least you think the system is the best system. But a lot of people, including the President of the United States right now, are questioning the system. It's corrupt, it's full of voter fraud, the center of American democracy, Washington, is a swamp, and so on. And there are a whole number of fundamental problems here, and problems which, by the way, are in part created by technology, like this fragmentation of public discourse. How can we be so divided? Well, I hate to say it, but the internet has enabled that. But technology also enables us to have some solutions to these problems as well. And this is kind of a long conversation. We could talk about this for quite a while, but I will just say a couple of things about the problem and solution. So the fundamental problem to me is that politicians are not accountable to citizens. So you think about it, in the United States, what is it, 94% of Americans think there should be background checks for firearm purchases, but Congress can't pass a law reflecting the will of the people. So government for the people, by the people, of the people. This is risible because elected representatives are not accountable to citizens, they're accountable to the people who put them in power, the people who funded their campaigns. So how do we move to a whole new model of democracy? I mean, I don't want to be too hard on this because we had this first era of democracy that's been a lot better than what what existed before, which was kings and nobles making all the decisions about things. But we had this first era and we created these representative institutions, but there was a weak public mandate. Citizens were inert. Politicians are beholden to the big funders that put them in power, and there's opacity everywhere. You don't really know what's going on. Imagine a second era enabled by a next generation of technology where we have a culture of public deliberation, active citizenship, where we have ways of finding out what is the truth, where we have politicians that are accountable to citizens. We could do that. Why don't we have smart votes? We can have smart money, but using blockchain technology, you send your kid off to university, you hope he spends the money on books and tuition and not in the bar. Well, with smart money, he goes into the bar, orders a mojito, and the money says, sorry, Bobby, I don't do mojitos. I only do books and tuition. Well, we could have a vote inside a smart contract, whereby you're not just voting for a politician, you're voting for their program. And if they don't execute on their program, then there are all kinds of consequences. Maybe funds don't flow, people don't get paid. Ultimately, someone is removed from power. So it's not that technology is going to solve all of our problems. It's just that we have this next generation of technology that gives us another kick at the can to kind of rewrite the economic power grid and the old order of things and to rebuild some of our institutions. And this pandemic is just hammering us right now to think about new ways of doing things.
Absolutely.
We're seeing a lot of shift in terms of that thinking, and what you're really talking about is a greater level of decentralization here. And I think you're trying to take that power to the individual. Existing models were representative democracy, which operate a little bit different when you're in a republic. And so that kind of changes the thing because you have to balance the majority and the minority views. I think that was what the framers of the U.S. Constitution were trying to do. It's just that, when there's distrust in institutions and distrust in systems, it becomes a little harder for those things to happen. And so you talk a little bit, about, what actually happens, post this kind of distrust and this decentralized work that's actually happening. So what can we do? Where do you see blockchain taking this forward in terms of some of those other ideas, in terms of for the economy, post-pandemic? Where do you think this will go?
Well, I'll tell you, and there's a lot of topics here, but I'm just going to pick up on one. Our time's running out too. But the pandemic has a lot to do with data or lack thereof. Clinicians have not had the data, epidemiologists to be able to have early warning systems to track stuff and so on. And data is really is the new asset class of the digital age. But if you look at health data, it's all locked up in these little silos, and we don't own it. And there's no way to aggregate data across all of our individual identities. Now, we could have a self-sovereign healthcare record, part of a broader identity that could be truly extraordinary, where we own our data, we can get access to it, we can use that data to plan our life, we can monetize it, but there are also agreements as part of a social contract where in a crisis like, say, a pandemic, that anonymized data gets aggregated instantly for epidemiologists. And that could be real-time data. We're all wearing these wearables. We got measuring our heart rate, and it could be our temperature or our, blood pressure, whether or not we're coughing and all kinds of other stuff. So this is a subset of, to me, what I think is, it's right up there with climate change in my mind, about a fundamental issue that we need to tackle, and technology is at the heart of it, which is the notion of identity. Think about it, the virtual ray knows more about you than you do, this trail of digital terms that we leave. You
virtual ray is always smarter. It's not.
Well,
it doesn't
maybe,
come close, so
Well, the actual ray can't remember exactly where you were a year ago, or what you said, or what you bought, or
they can't. Totally can't.
What medication you had, or what diagnosis you had, or and so on. And the trouble is that we all create this data, but it's sort of like I've called it, it's a little pejorative, I've called it digital feudalism, where it's like under feudalism, you created value, produce or something, the landlord took away most of it and you were left with a little bit. Well, we all create this data, it's expropriated by these digital conglomerates, and which is a term that we used 15 years ago, and no one's ever paid attention to it till this year. But these digital conglomerates capture it, and we're left with a few cabbages. And this is a really big problem for in ways that people don't understand. First of all, you can't use the data to plan your life. How amazing would it be if you had access to all this data? You can't monetize it, so that gets back to this bifurcation of wealth. You can't, it's not secure, it's on central servers, and there are two kinds of these things, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. It means that in a pandemic, you can't, or a crisis, you can't aggregate data across all these identities because, they're in silos. And our privacy is being undermined. And people say to me, well, Don, privacy's dead, get over it. You got nothing to hide, what's your problem? This is stupidity. Privacy is the foundation of freedom. And we need to get all this data back because it represents our identities. Get it back so that we can manage it responsibly for ourselves. Now, enter new technology, and I can't explain how, but I've written about this lots. It's in Blockchain Revolution, actually. Using blockchain, we could have a self-sovereign portable identity that's sweeping up this exhaust of data, capturing it and enabling us to achieve all of these benefits for society. And if we're going to have a civilization going forward, we need to do this because we need to have autonomy as individuals and the ability to have our own identities.
For those of you who are watching, go to Don Tapscott's website. Just Google his name, you see the website. He recently wrote about 5 ways the blockchain can help the economy and business in the pandemic, starting with the self-sovereign identity that you just mentioned. 5 massively interesting use cases. Incentive models to reward responsible behavior was my favorite. But I encourage you to, in the interest of time, please go read Don's thinking. And again, he has had 3 decades of super accurate predictions about the near future. So really appreciate your shared wisdom, Don. Really privileged to hear from you.
Just a couple of things.
Thanks a lot. This is amazing.
Yes, a couple of things on that. Actually, I'm not really a futurist. I think I'm sort of the school the future is something to be predicted, not something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. And now is a time when we all need to come together and forge a whole new contract and a new consensus. And I will say something that I haven't said before publicly, announcing next week on Wednesday, we're announcing dontapscott.com. And my team put this together, and it actually goes back 4 decades, back to my running for the mayor of Edmonton in 1977 under a radical socialist program. And I printed that program today, so you can go there and see what you think of it.
That's awesome. Breaking news on DisrupTV, dontapscott.com. I love it.
But I welcome your comment because I have a few days to clean it up.
Well, we're here with Don Tapscott, co-founder and executive chairman at Blockchain Research Institute and author. Check out the new book, Supply Chain Revolution, a co-patriot to Blockchain Revolution. You can follow him on Twitter at DTAPSCOTT. And big shout out to Robots and Pencils for sponsoring our DisrupTV show. So thank you very much. Thanks for being on the show, Don. And we'll look forward to the book.
Terrific. Watch his TED Talk and the murmuration of birds, and he is one of the super thinkers, and he is a futurist. I disagree with him. Anyway, speaking of amazing insights and digital transformation accelerated at hyper rate, our next guest, Lenley Hensarling, Chief Strategy Officer at Aerospike. Lenley has more than 30 years of experience in engineering, management, product management, operational management, both in startups and large successful software companies. Lenley previously held executive positions at Novell Enterworks, JD Edwards, Enterprise TV, and Oracle. He has extensive experience in delivering value to customers and shareholders in both enterprise applications and infrastructure software. Lenley believes that business is now happening in real time. Absolutely, speed to value is key, and that the right infrastructure for serving data to new real-time applications is rapidly accelerating requirements for businesses in order to be successful. You can follow Lenley on Twitter at ParkCityGlisse. Welcome, Lenley, to DisrupTV.
Hey there, Ray, Vala. So,
hey, welcome.
Very interesting listening to Don. I've read several of his books, like we all have, and blockchain's one of those things that needs massive scale and needs to be faster than it is. Although it's delivering a lot of value today. I did peek into some of his thoughts on supply chain, and we went through this massive aggregation and elimination of any slack in the system, right? And with the COVID crisis, if you will, a lot of people are rethinking supply chains to be more diverse and to be more decentralized and to have contingencies. So I think that's something that is going to hinge on distributed information. And when you look at digital transformation, it's really about opening up our systems. I mean, I can remember a conversation, Ray, you and I had, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 years ago maybe, but it was about, the difference between adversarial relationships in a supply chain and supplying all the information transparently between, consumers and providers, and really trying to optimize and share the benefits of that. And I think that, that's at the heart of what we do. It's at the heart of what we do, even, in our relationships with the bad guys like Amazon, right? They share tremendous amounts of information to us. We share tremendous amounts of information that we don't even know about to them. But there is an interplay of value exchange there, and we've everybody in technology been on a hunt for removing friction from transactions.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what happens in digital transformation. So it used to be, you go and you make a payment or you deposit money in your bank account, and your expectation was you could get to it 3 days from now. Who would put up with that today? No one. And now you deposit it, you look at your phone, and you want to see it reflected instantaneously, right? And then you want to transfer money, from here to Berlin, from here to Buenos Aires, and have it show up instantaneously. So that's the kind of interaction, the kind of speed that we now have to have. And it's not, it's not going back to your Oracle database and your ERP system and waiting for batch jobs to run. That's no longer okay.
So speed's so important, right? We're talking about precision decisions, right? One of the things that we talked about at your event, and we got to make fast decisions. We got to make them quickly. There's another concept that's really behind this, right? We call it decision velocity. And in decision velocity, machines are able to make decisions 100 times per second. Humans are able to make a decision per second, and it takes them 4 weeks to get out of management committee. That is like the worst information asymmetry, decision asymmetry that we get to, right? And so what's going on, right? How do we get to that point where we're confident enough that those automated decisions are worth it?
So we have a lot of customers doing that today. And what they speak about is the fidelity of the models. And fidelity of the models dependent upon how much information they can consume, right? I like to make the analogy of people, right? When we say, here's a smart person, here's a person whose judgment I have confidence in, it's because they have both very specific expertise and very specific information, and a lot of it, but they also have a broad contextual set of information and expertise as well.
Yep.
And to apply both of those simultaneously in milliseconds, right, requires you to be able to access more data into broadly parallelized, computations and Spark, or pick your favorite, AI ML framework. And I think all of us are trying to figure out, how do we do that? We have customers who tell us we're adding 10 to 100 new data sources a month into our modeling. Okay, think about that. And all that's streaming in by some definition of real time. It's not, I get it refreshed on a monthly basis, right? I get it refreshed multiple times a day, multiple times an hour. And so being in the moment, is sort of my definition of real time. And that's what we're striving to support at Aerospike, right? That scale, that breadth and throughput. But what's really behind it is sort of a simple thing. We all, know a smart person, a well-educated person. It's not somebody who knows one thing. It's not somebody who's access only to a part of the information. It's someone who has access to a broad range and can hold that in their head, right? Simultaneously pattern match it against the broad contextual reference data they have. And that's the game that's being played out now. And we're trying, as fast as we can evolve, because people are really driving this, precision decisioning, as Ray calls it, right? Very fast now. It's evolving continuously. And, we're trying to evolve with it.
We had the head of McKinsey research on our show a couple of weeks ago, and one of the key findings of their, in pandemic consumer buying behavior was that 75% of Americans have switched brands during the pandemic. And number one, two reason was safety and accessibility. So when we talk about supply chain disruption, try buying a fridge or furniture, or maybe early on toilet paper or hand sanitizer, but the number was remarkable. Certain countries like India was 91% had switched brands. These are unheard of numbers in terms of a shock to brand loyalty. So it's part of the trust equation, because safety, for example, is now a brand pillar. And to gain trust, you have to demonstrate speed to value. And if you demonstrate speed to value, consistently, you can hopefully earn trust. So what are your thoughts about what we've experienced in the last 7 months in terms of the pandemic's role in accelerating the need for precision decision-making, execution velocity, co-creating value at the speed of need, at the moment of truth, during that customer journey where you recognize buying signals and you provide the right product on the right channel to the right person with the right value proposition. On the e-commerce side, McKinsey said there was 10 years of adoption accelerated just in the past 3 months. So there's definitely clear signals that transformation, digital transformation, and rapid decision-making is now a boardroom discussion, because it's a matter of survival. It's no longer nice to have. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I participate in a couple other sort of roundtable things with investors. And one of the things I brought up early in the cycle with them was that supply chains were going to be disrupted pretty quickly, because they'd been optimized to be just in time, and that there wasn't much slack in the system. And that had provided great efficiency, but not great resiliency necessarily. And so there are two sides to this story, right? One is that things became broken for a while. I mean, we all had the experience of walking into a grocery store, which at least in this country, was a new experience for most of us, and the shelves were empty. And the shelves remained empty for some things for longer than any of us had expected. Being a guy who worked in supply chain software for an extended period of time, I was sitting there looking at what it was, looking at what the dependent, raw materials were, thinking about how much outsourcing, offshoring had gone on, what the length of those supply chains were, where the virus was impacting, and thinking about how this chess game was going to be played. One of the things that struck me was how fast it all came back. I mean, it seemed slow, but how fast it all came back, given that there were no real buffering anymore. We sold software on the basis of you will not have to have this much inventory.
Right.
You will not have to have this in your warehouse.
Right.
I mean, this is like and it's the longest supply chains ever too, right? I mean, you're coming from China, right? The stuff that's being made is like 3 months old by the time it shows up. It's not like it's being made like a couple weeks in advance, right? I mean, it's like, can you imagine Halloween candy? That's like another one, right? I mean, who would have known? They make the candy 6 months in advance, right?
That's right.
That's another interesting thing.
So it's so tough, but here again, the ability to respond faster, right? To see. And to have a picture of your supply chain. And I think Don was touching on some interesting things where, the pendulum swings back and forth between, centralization and decentralization. And I think it's going to swing back towards decentralization. That makes the problem somewhat more complex. But the more decentralized it is, the more possibility of resiliency comes. And then you're starting to have to share information across a network with more points in it. Yeah. And have, transparency, not in a linear supply chain where I've decided this is the guy I can leverage the most against and get the lowest price, but that has optionality built into it. And now we have the tools with AI and ML and with the ability to process data in real time. And like I said, we're trying to keep up. We're constantly working on the distribution of data, the sharing of data. We just came out with a complete rewrite of our cross data center replication. Why? Because the world is distributed, and we think that there will be more decentralization and more sharing of data. Not only within
you share Don Tapscott's view here on this decentralization that's about to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's something that swings back and forth. There's probably a golden mean. And we don't quite recognize it when we pass it going both ways, but I think it's going to swing back towards decentralization because that's the basis of resiliency. And as I said, the models become somewhat more complex. Data has to be shared across more points. Blockchain in itself mathematically is kind of fascinating, but what's really fascinating are the implications in terms of contracts, the speed at which contracts can be put in place and become transparent and enforceable, right? And I think that's just more data, more real-time data that has to feed into things, like the ability to say, I'm supporting 200 contracts where I had 5 before because I want optionality. I would like to have toilet paper come from, Finland as well as Vancouver. Why? Well, if you distribute the risk, we all know this technically. Like, does anybody have one data center that's a cloud vendor? Does anybody have one zone? No. Would it be more efficient to have it all together, one thing?
Yeah.
Sure. But we distribute the possibility of failure. We know that technically, and I think that's going to ripple through supply chains. I think it's going to ripple through organizational models. The people who had distributed workforces were better off. Hey, these guys got sick, but we shifted the work. Oh, wait, these guys are well now.
So, hey, I'm going to give you 4 use cases, and you tell me what's going to change, right? So I'll give them ahead of time: fraud prevention, customer experience, payment processing, and recommendation engines. So what changes with fraud prevention?
Fraud detection's changing sort of radically because it used to be we were trying to find and identify the bad guy, right? And now we're trying to understand the customer more deeply and be able to recognize that behavior and that person and to know more than just one track of behavior about them, right? And so that's meant capturing more data over a longer period of time and keeping that and having a more sophisticated model of who Ray is. I mean, Ray, how often are you in the same place?
I'm not. That's the thing. But now I'm home for a year now. If I go out traveling to like 40 different cities in like 5 weeks, it's going to be fraud every transaction. I'm a little worried.
This is the contextual information that has to be there. And so I think the models have become much richer. I mean, we have new expectations about it. We like it when it says, you bought these 3 things and you're, in Moscow. This happened to me once on a credit card. And then and you go like, is this you? And you go, yes, done. Isn't that great? As opposed to, gee, you travel a lot, so I'm going to treat you this way. If it was somebody else who never leaves the US, they treat it differently. They think that's fraud. They wouldn't just, can you confirm this in a nice way, right? So I think that's fraud, just richer models with more data held over longer period of times to create a truer picture of you.
Yeah, I know I had that happen to me. I was in Dubai, London, and New York all in like one day, and someone thought it was massive fraud.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a $3 bottle of water. I mean, come on.
It's a big takeaway talking to you, Lenley, is this notion of balance between efficiency versus resiliency.
Yes.
Not even not verse, but really just a balance between the two. And when you're talking about resiliency, in so many words, it's a decentralized framework. It's diversity of suppliers. It's modularity of design for easy substitution. It's sharing insights at optimal speed, sharing insights across the ecosystem. So yes, there's complexity and additional nodes and systems, but this is why you need a fast database. This is why you need to lean into technology, because I think one of the biggest blind spots in business pre-pandemic was not valuing decentralized models as much as we should, because we light switch in March, the world went purely digital, purely decentralized. You couldn't go into office, you couldn't go to your store, you couldn't watch your favorite team compete in person. So it's remarkable. So can you talk about, again, emphasis on speed to value? What advice, you're the lead strategy guy at your company. When you're sitting in front of a CEO and the CEO says, Lenley, help me maintain relevance for my brand and my company, what's the advice you give them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to know your customer, right? And the expectation of understanding, several things. The context in which they're operating, to be aware of the world, right? The whole reference model that customer is operating in, to know specifically what you can do for them, and to try and engage with them to map your value into their goals, right? And I think that what's happening right now is that, as we talked about, the move to become digital has been accelerated. Yeah. But I think that the understanding of what the implications of going digital are is sort of unevenly distributed. The people who started and have been prosecuting this for as much as 10 years for some people, 5 years for other. It is that if you're getting into it now seriously and you've been dabbling in it, what happens is you've opened up your systems, just open them up to, instead of 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 users, you're talking about 20 million, 30 million people coming at you and, wanting access to the status of their orders, to understanding, where their order is. And you're opening up your internal systems to all of them. And that means data volumes, that means massive read volumes. I mean, we all come, I always like to say, your customers come armed. They come armed.
Sometimes they're two-fisted too.
Yeah, it is. And they're going continually saying, what happened to my order? Not because it's late, but just where is it? And they can do that. And they expect truth in that.
Yeah. So there's a cost.
Thank you so much.
There's a cost to radical transparency, but if you execute well, the value is you earn their trust and hopefully brand loyalty.
Yeah, it is a trust relationship thing. Hey, Ray, great.
No, we're here with Lenley Hensarling, Chief Strategy Officer at Aerospike. You can follow him at Twitter at Park City Glisse, GLISSE. I'm going to have ask you why you chose that Twitter handle another time. So thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for being here and sharing your Friday with us.
Thanks,
so
thank you very much.
This is awesome. We are here, and this is amazing. We are on episode number 208, sponsored by Robots and Pencils. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your sponsorship. You can follow Robots and Pencils, of course. They do some wonderful mobile design work. Now, who do we have right now?
All right, so this may be, it's a U.S. baseball sports analogy, but this is the cleanup hitter spot where, the end of the game, you bring the best and brightest to bring it home, and it's our privilege to have two of the three co-founders of Wonder. We have Stéphane Roux and Pascal Steck, co-founders of Wonder, formerly known as YoTribe, as our guest. Wonder is a virtual space where people can meet and talk. And right now, there's over 10,000 folks that are hosting their events on Wonder, which is pretty awesome. Stéphane is in charge of the general management at Wonder. He was previously a consultant at McKinsey, and Pascal's in charge of marketing and sales on Wonder. He was previously product manager at N26 in Berlin and head of marketing at Shopko in San Francisco. I know you guys are dialing in from the other side of the ocean. Thank you for disrupting your dinner to be with us. I appreciate having you here.
Thanks for having us here.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for being here. So for those who are watching the show, we're actually using Wonder as our platform for our event. And part of the reason we're doing that is, I'm going to be honest, I am so sick and tired of virtual events. They are so boring. They're one to many. It's all broadcast. It stinks, right? And so that was probably the design point for you guys in terms of changing the way virtual events actually work, in terms of getting it away from being just full broadcast to actually getting to the networking piece. But before we start there, you guys started out as a different company. How did you start out, and how did you end up doing the pivot? Because I think that's a very interesting part of the story.
Yeah, so the three of us got together, I think it was in January, wanting to build something. And the idea was to focus on a smaller, more manageable problem, make a bit of money that would then allow us to focus on something big. And the idea we went for was a platform for wedding photographers. And so we worked on it for a couple of months. It was looking fairly good. The problem was obviously the first week that we were unit economics positive was also the week that lockdown started in Europe. So it was a bit earlier than the States. Wow. And so we realized, that's obviously not the kind of the growth market of the next 2 years, which was actually, it was a bit of a gift in disguise, I think, because we then sat down and said, we still don't have any money, but at least we get the chance to focus on something, big and relevant now. That's not just important, for the crisis, but also for the time after the crisis. So we thought, what does the world look like in maybe 5 or 10 years? And I think, getting together in large groups was probably at this point kind of the most obvious gap in terms of, what we would need to feel comfortable in a world after COVID. And it was also where we felt there was the strongest gap in the market based on our own experience and I think everyone else's experience, as you just said, Ray.
That's amazing. A few months ago, we had the co-founder of Square, and a multi-billion-dollar company, and the lesson there was don't disqualify yourself if you don't have experience when trying to go after unsolved problems. By definition, if they're unsolved, it means there really isn't experience there. So why not go for it? And certainly, beginning of this year, pre-pandemic, I don't think all of us had experience in terms of a platform that's needed to have a beautiful virtual event experience. So tell us about, the gumption of you three co-founders, going after trying to solve an unsolved problem, which was delivering a beautiful experience for virtual events.
Well, I think it basically starts with the appreciation of the fact that we have so many amazing tools for virtual communications out there. Like if you look at like Zoom, Google Meet, like very established, very well-made products, but they all go to they all tackle one thing, which is one-to-one communication or small group communication. So for these, the paradigms with which they were built are fit perfectly. So you have one person talking, everybody else listening, right? Or you have a breakout sessions where you do like a top-down moderation and you have you get into smaller groups. But when it comes to 50, hundreds or thousands of people, like these paradigms get boring very quickly. Like you want to have some as a guest, you want to have some freedom of choice. Like, who do you want to talk to when do you finish a conversation? How big is your group that you want to communicate with? Some people prefer like large groups, some prefer more intimate conversations. So this is where we really felt that there is a product missing, and that a lot of these like conventional tools were being abused for large group gatherings. And this is where we thought there's a big gap that opened for us in the market.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I find myself more and more, you know, in that one to many or many to many, but I lack that contextual intelligence. You know, when I'm in an environment where there's, let's say, 50 people that are participating. I was at a digital CIO event, and there was 50 to 100 CIOs in the room. It would have been awesome if I just had, these are the CIOs that are connected to you on Twitter. These are the CIOs that are connected to you on LinkedIn. These are the CIOs that have commented on your articles you've written or watched DisrupTV. I would love to have the visibility of finding affinity groups just based on social connections. So I would know I have a pre-existing relationship with some of these folks, which would give me the courage to knock on their circle and talk to them. I lack all of that. And so, I look forward to platforms that are smart enough to recommend connections just based on my digital footprint and exhaust, as Don Tapscott mentioned in the first segment. Sorry, Ray, I'm just speaking out loud.
No, keep going. Hey, but there is something about what you're saying is very important, right? I mean, there's also an element of designing for serendipity, and that's what really attracted us to the platform that you have. I mean, there were other platforms that forced you into little seating arrangements. There were other platforms that told you that here's a dedicated room that you had to think about ahead time. But there's something about the serendipity of walking into a large room and you see three people and you get together, you connect, and then do that naturally. It's not forced. And that design for serendipity, I mean, was that intentional? Was it just something that you modeled that got you to that point?
No, I think you're right, and that was one of the core design principles of the whole platform. I think when you see small groups interact in real life, then everyone speaks to everyone, as Pascal said earlier. But as soon as groups get bigger, then people break up and kind of move around groups. And the serendipity, specifically at events, is often that you join someone who you know, and they have other people around them who you don't know. And that's often where you make those random encounters. So that's one. And the other one is through space. You just stand next to someone at a bar. And so we consciously brought space back into the social experience of the platform, because that is the source of most serendipity. And I think it's almost like there's kind of two levels of serendipity. One is that you want to have an infrastructure that just allows for serendipity in the way that people know it already. And that's what we've built with Wanda so far. The next level connects a bit more to what you just said, Vala, which is people don't want randomness. When they say serendipity, they mean, by coincidence, encountering the right people.
Yeah.
That's a cool moment of serendipity, not just literally, bumping into random people. And data, I think, on users and on guests and on their preferences and on their previous events, but also, how will they interact? Like, do they speak to a lot of people? Do they speak a lot? Do they speak little? Do they always speak to the same people? Using that information to kind of gently nudge people to to in a very subtle way, just have those serendipitous encounters that feel very random, but that are actually a little bit curated. Like, I think that's kind of the art, and that's where a digital platform gives you way more tools than a real life event, which has those elements of curation as well.
Right. I mean, for me, it's never purely random. I'm an introvert, so first of all, I don't find it comfortable being in a large environment, and I'm the guy who initiates the conversation. That's just not me. Often I'm watching the room and someone's kind enough to come and say, "Hey, you look bored. My name is so-and-so." And then I love the conversation. But
so we can help you. We can drop you exactly where you need to be at the next event. We drop you in a group where we know there's people there who will chat to you and who will initiate the conversation.
Yeah. So I think there is a subtle precision in random collisions. Like, for example, when I'm at Ray's event, I may have I'm wearing a name tag that says speaker, and it's a ribbon that says speaker. So even being able to go on your digital platform, where when I hover next to a name, I can see they're a speaker and maybe the topic that they're speaking or the company that they represent. If I see they're speaking on, let's say, digital transformation or impact of machine learning, that may be all the nudge I need to say hi. Whereas somebody's there talking about innovation in agriculture, which I know nothing about. So I may be like, all right, well, I'll listen to him talk before I reach out to him just to make sure that there's overlap of interest. So again, I'm hopeful that there's a bit of contextual intelligence served to me so that I get the courage, because I need courage to go, knock on their door and say, hi, I'm Vala. What do you do? So
no, but it makes a lot of sense, right? Like for our event, like one of the things that we have done is we had to let people understand that it's a different type of event. There is actual networking, right? So we've actually I've had 220 conversations where I've walked them through the Wonder platform. We've showed them what to expect. We're going to greet them at the beginning.
Your top salesperson, Ray Wong.
You're probably getting a lot of leads somewhere. But yeah, no, I mean, I could actually, but the point being is and we've got rooms like shy but social, quiet room, don't bother me, I'm watching the event, foodies unite. Like the idea was to create these different kind of places so that people could actually feel comfortable as they're talking, right? I mean, and it's part of it, but people need to know that it's not the normal event. Like you're actually going to be there. You have to invest some time, and once they have that, I think it's going to be interesting. But that being on the fact, like, what are things on the roadmap, right? What are important things for you guys? I mean, what are people asking for?
Yeah, I think we
and you guys have been everywhere. Like almost a lot of the universities are now using you. Like I've seen you at different, it's coming ground. There's a groundswell coming up. People are starting to discover who you are. So
I think we covered a little bit of that already. But basically, we have two, let's say, two fronts. Like one is the space. So we wanna get this. We wanna really flesh out this inspiration from the offline world and use the space in order to give guests, something in their hand to structure their social interactions, just like we do it in real life. So we're gonna build it out with a special functionality for certain areas, so that when you enter this venue, you walk through this space and you see all the different things happening in different corners, so that you basically have a full experience, and everywhere something different is going on, and you just go wherever you feel most comfortable. That's one thing. Then the second thing is really this making sure that the best conversations happen that are possible at this event for any given guest. We see it a little bit as what is music for Spotify, videos for YouTube is conversations for us. This is our content. And here we have to deliver the best possible content, the best possible conversations. Here we want to give people information, we want to give them context, we want to help them manage the workflow, right? You probably saw those people who are very professional event goers. They know exactly who they want to talk to, what they want from them, etc. We can actually help any guest to become more, professional event attendee by giving them tools at hand to make sure they find the right people that are valuable to them in any way. So these are the two fronts.
Yeah, and I'm giving people a chance to take a look at what you're doing, which has really helped the event work. So yeah.
Are you considering maybe gamifying the process, where if you like a conversation with someone, you give them a like, and at the end of the event, you actually have a leaderboard of the most interesting person in terms of conversations? Well, you laugh at that, but all social networks are based on gaming principles.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. So. I mean, it's we all have social influence by how many followers we have on various platforms, but none of that is really tested in real time when you're at an event. So it's not the person that tweeted the most and got on a leaderboard, but a person that had one-on-one intimate conversations at the event. Anyway, food for thought. It may encourage people, again, introverts like myself, to want to have more meaningful conversations, knowing that I can potentially build a reputation of someone who's interesting at events. Which on any leaderboard, I'm usually at the bottom if it ever existed. So Anyway, go ahead, Ray. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. I mean, building on Vala's idea, right? Like right now we're walking in and it's anonymous, right? You kind of know people are, but you don't know who they are. I mean, it's going to be interesting. Like, I mean, on product roadmap, like back to part of the gamification, if you can add profiles, right? As people start to see things like, it's almost like it's like bring characteristics, right? And so people with different profiles can get matched automatically. Would be very interesting as well as part of that gamification. Like people who are all from Berlin or people who are from London, right? And people from New York, right? And you could automatically choose that grouping and hop in. Or for example, people who are really interested in fast cars or people who are really interested in basketball or other interests. You get some very interesting things as you start building those types of profiles. Not that I want you to create a Match.com site, but the idea is like you can, at least in conversations and starter conversations, there's a lot more to bring, or just feeding their LinkedIn profile and you can suck in information there and just create interesting matches. So
I'm saying, I'm attending Ray's conference and I work at Salesforce. So if I could create my own virtual room on the landscape that says, if you're a Salesforce customer, I'd love to speak with you and meet you. And so I create my own room, my own topic of interest. And if there are Salesforce attendees, customer attendees, they can come and speak with me. So an opportunity for me to create my own room, my own topic. And if people come, great. If they don't, they don't. Again, when I wear a name badge or a lanyard, it says Vala Afshar Salesforce speaker. So I'm sending signals to people. I don't think it's random. People read your badge and they go, oh, he works at Salesforce. I happen to be a customer. I have a problem that it has gone unresolved for some time. Maybe I can talk to him. Or I have a
Turn the badge around.
Yeah. Or I have a new business opportunity that I want to speak to Vala about. Anyway, so ability to attract audiences would be great.
Yeah,
I've been with Vala so much. It's usually I've seen you, I follow you on Twitter. I'm so glad to meet you in person.
That happens too.
In this respect, I think we should. We're also aware of the fact that the people who know the guests best are actually the people who sit on top of the communities, right? And we actually understand ourselves as a tool for communities. Like events are just a way for communities to interact with each other. But
Sure.
At the end of the day, you want to serve the community to get together, to exchange, and to have like a valuable community life. And there's always a center. There's always someone who keeps those people together.
Yeah.
And those are actually the ones who know best, like what triggers these people. What do they want to talk about? What are the segments? So we want to keep it. And this is probably something you saw as you played around with Wonder. Like it's very flexible. We want to build it very flexible so that everybody can like build their vision on top of it, rather than being too restricted into a certain niche or a framework.
That autonomy is great.
Yeah,
that autonomy is great.
No, we do. We love it. Like this is the backdrop for what we're going to be using, right? And you can see like speakers are going to come after the event and meet here so they can catch up. If you've got questions for speakers, if you want to go in and have some deep thoughts, you can come here. I didn't use teleport mode, but the point being is like you get some cool stuff in here. Like I'm watching the show, right? Don't bother me, just text, right? Quiet zone, hang out, right? Don't disturb me, right? And then Road Warriors Unite, like Road Warriors Rehab. That's really what that is. So what people are actually looking at. So, but it's kind of fun spaces, and you can create those on your own, which is kind of fun. Not that I should be demoing your product, but my point being is we're really excited about it and happy to have you here. So tell us about funding. Like what's going on? How's the startup scene in Berlin? How's your funding round? What are you guys looking for? Are you still looking for additional funding? For other investors? I know some of them watch our show, so it'd be a good chance to kind of give them a quick pitch.
Yeah, I think the situation is that we closed our first funding round about 8 weeks ago. We only announced it like a week ago, together with the rename actually from Eurotrop to Wanda, and with a couple of major product updates. And so we raised a pre-seed or small seed round of $1.2 million. And I think the original plan was to kind of make it last in a standard 12 to 18 month runway. Style. And what we found in the last 2 months, so since closing it, is that with user growth has been somewhere between 25 to 30% week on week, all organic. Wow. And so that's a doubling every 3 weeks. And so it's kind of all the stuff we build within the company, like a customer support system, for example, is like obsolete like a month later, basically. And so I think this is still kind of materializing and
Sure.
still work in progress, but I think there's a high likelihood that we will come back on the kind of fundraising scene much earlier than anticipated, because at the moment, there is just a lot more that we can do, and there's a lot more we can invest to bolster that growth. And kind of in a nutshell, I think we're probably ready for the next round much earlier than expected, at least in terms of the milestones.
Congratulations. That's great. Those are good problems to have. That's great.
Well, we're here with startup founders Stéphane Roux, Pascal Steck, and your third one we're going to bring in next time, of Wonder, formerly YoTribe. For those who have actually been using the product, you can follow them on Twitter at YoTribe. Wonder is the platform we're using for Constellation Connected Enterprise. You'll hear from them as well at our event. And more importantly, the startup scene in Berlin is hot. And of course, these are two of the three poster children of that startup scene. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you guys. Well done. Well done. That was awesome, Ray. Great to speak to entrepreneurs, incredible futurists and strategy leaders across, amazing companies. Next week is episode 209. And we have Aaron Ames, CEO of Ultimate Kronos Group, UKG. We have Craig Charlton, CEO of Sugar CRM. And we have Daphne Jones, independent board member and executive coach and keynote speaker. So it should be a spectacular show next Friday. Ray, closing remarks on Don Tapscott and Lenley and the founders of Wonder.
I think we are seeing a massive shift, and this conversation around digital assets and that data being the asset in the new economy, the push to decentralization in terms of how we're actually going to look at making decisions, and really about the way that we need to network in a digital world all come together. And you saw that today in this episode, and you're going to see more of it as we go on throughout the year. It's something I've been writing about in my next book, which one day we'll talk about. But more importantly, we're going to see it at Constellation Connected Enterprise, which is the 27th to 28th. So we'll be there. So see you there and have a great Friday. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. See you next Friday. Bye-bye.